And it's 1:30 in Lagos, Nigeria. It's time to give you an update from the world of business here on Business Incorporated. Here's what we have for you on the program today. In Nigeria, the CBN defers September MPC meeting. A new date has not been announced yet. Digital Quality of Life Index shows South Africa is leading on the continent. And looking at the most improved currency in Africa, we go to the Gambia. You're welcome to the program. I'm Ini John McQuarrie. We start as usual with market numbers starting from Africa. And we see that the day after President Bola Tinubu rang the bell at Nasdaq, unfortunately at intraday, the market is down, but not to lose hope. It's a marginal drop there, 0.02%, at 68,323.13. South Africa is, however, worse. 2.08% in the red at intraday, 73% at 73,267.88. We go to other parts of the continent and see in Egypt, it's positive right there, 1.29% at 20,052.66. Kenya closed yesterday in the red, more than 1%. And yes, Kenya has lost 100 index points, unfortunately 97.17. We move still in the market, obviously, but for Middle East now to see how the market is doing. And we see that most of the markets right there are positive. Abu Dhabi is up 0.09% at 9,831.63. Dubai is also positive 0.53% at 4,151.98. And other regions of there, we see Saudi Arabia right there in the red, 0.83%. And Qatar is back to green, 0.28%. Let's go to Berlin now, where they are very concerned about the auto workers' strike going on in the United States. We know that 3 big U.S. car companies have been on strike for almost a week now, since last week, and it seems that there's no end in sight. I wonder why Berlin is concerned with this, but Lars joins us to tell us. Lars Holter, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today again. And what can you tell us about this current situation, and of course, why is Berlin so concerned about it?
Hello, Ini. Thanks for having me. Workers are indeed going into their 6th day of the job, and it seems that Detroit's big 3 automakers and the United Auto Workers Union remain far apart in their negotiations. There have been more talks over the last 2 days, but with not much success at all. Currently, almost 13,000 workers are on strike, and that is almost 1 out of 10 of all union members at the big 3. Obviously, we're looking at General Motors and Ford, as well as Chrysler, now part of the Stellantis group, and the union has targeted 1 plant for each of the 3 companies. Strikes have halted production at plants in Michigan, Ohio, and Missouri. They're the plants that produce the Ford Bronco, the Jeep Wrangler, and the Chevy Colorado, alongside some other popular models. And as much as this is serious now for the companies, they are at this point offering the union no more than 20% as a raise for their workers. And the union is demanding 40%, something GM President Mark Reuss says in an op-ed this week was, quote, untenable.
So aren't these demands too high?
Yes, 40% sounds like a lot, doesn't it? I haven't seen a 40% raise ever. I don't know about you. But you know who got a 40% raise? The CEOs of the big 3. And that is why the union has picked that number. They're essentially saying that if business is as strong as to warrant a 40% raise for the boss, that it should be the same for workers. The unions are not for the first time shining a light on a trend that has been going on for years in the US. And that's a rise cuts in executive pay far outpacing workers' compensation. To give you some numbers here, the ratio of CEO pay to the average non-supervisory production worker at the biggest U.S. companies has jumped from less than 40-1 over the last 4 decades to nearly 400-1, meaning that a CEO today is making 400 times what his average employee is making, and that is a level of inequality that one could also call untenable.
Yeah, I hear you there. But let's shift a bit and see what investors are looking at today in the markets.
Yeah, it's Central Bank Week. We've been waiting for details on monetary policy, and first up yesterday was the U.S. Fed. That was pretty much what investors had expected. No interest hike, but the Federal Reserve indicated it could hike interest rates again this year and keep them elevated longer than feared. That as it struggles to bring inflation to heel, and that is partially due to the recent hike in oil prices. Now, with the world's #1 economy still in rough shape here, markets aren't all too happy, down for Thursday morning. And next up to help us find some direction are the Bank of England later today and the Bank of Japan tomorrow with their own take on their respective economies.
All right, thank you so much, Lars, for that. We're still in the markets now. World stocks fell for a 5th straight session. The dollar hit its strongest since March, and Swiss franc tumbled on Thursday as the latest crop of central bank interest rate moves continued to produce surprises. European equities stumbled after the U.S. Federal Reserve had signaled that it probably had at least one more hike in the tank after its historical rapid run-up in rates over the last 18 months. Currency dealers were caught off guard, though, as the Swiss National Bank unexpectedly kept its rate steady. And while Norway had hiked its rates, as widely expected, it surpassed too by signaling it could go again in December. And European Day was just getting going. Sterling, which has been on the slide since July, was down at $1.23 ahead of a potentially close call at the Bank of England after softer than expected UK inflation data this week. And in Asia, markets fell across the region after the U.S. Federal Reserve held its benchmark policy rate, but said it's raised interest rates one more time this year, according to the central bank's projections. Projections showed that the central bank expects to hike rates to a median of 5.6% by the end of 2023, and that's up from the current range between 5.25% and 5.5%. The rate-setting Federal Open Market Committee projects 2 rate cuts in 2024, which is 2 fewer than its forecast in June. That would put the funds rate around 5.1%. Now let's look at the numbers right there. We have Shanghai at 0.77%, 3,084.70. S&P, that's for Australia, is also in the red, 1.37%. And then we have the Nikkei 225, all of them in the red, 1.37%. Kospi also in the red, 1.75% at 2,514.97. And the Hang Seng Index also in the red, 1.29%. And now let's move a little bit away from the market. Not really, we're still in the market. The United States stock futures fell on Thursday, deepening losses for the week as investors come to terms with the Federal Reserve's plans to keep interest rates at higher levels for a longer period than hoped. Features tied to the Dow Jones right there in the red, 0.46%, 34,574. S&P also in the red, 0.61%, and NASDAQ also in the red. NASDAQ, of course, reminds me what the president did yesterday, ringing that bell. Our correspondents, we've been telling you about them. 4 of them have been covering events at UNGA, the United Nations General Assembly, and Maria was right in front of that building and tells us how the market closed yesterday in the United States.
A big day for U.S. and Nigeria, as the president was able to ring the bell at the NASDAQ. This day was one that the U.S. stock market, though, did not quite have an up day. As the U.S. stock market slid, the Dow Jones slid by 0.2%, the S&P 500 slid by almost 1%, and the heavy tech NASDAQ slid by 1.5%. This is mostly due to the fact that the Federal Reserve does not plan to decrease interest rates. Interest rates could be on the rise in the near future, and many investors are wanting to see what happens with the U.S. economy in the weeks and days ahead.
That's Maria right there. Maria, thank you. And we have more, of course, coming from New York at the UNGA meetings, which is still ongoing. Now let's go to oil prices. It fell on Thursday after posting the largest decline in a month in the previous session as U.S. interest rate hike expectations offset the impact of drawdowns in U.S. crude stockpiles. Brent futures for November delivery were down 78 cents to $92.75 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was also down 76 cents, that's about 0.9%, to $88.90 and reached its lowest level since September the 14th. The U.S. Federal Reserve maintained interest rates after its Federal Open Market Committee meeting, but stiffened its hawkish stance with a rate increase projected by year-end, which could dampen economic growth and overall fuel demand. Federal policymakers still see the bank's benchmark overnight rate range peaking this year at 5.50% to 5.75%, a quarter of a percentage point above the current range. That stance also led to the U.S. dollar surging to its highest since early March, contributing to more expensive commodities such as oil for buyers using other currencies. In the metals market now, gold extended its decline on Thursday, weighed by the surge in the U.S. dollar and U.S. bond yields after the Federal Reserve hardened its hawkish posture on interest rates. Spot gold shed 0.4% to $1,922.82 per ounce after briefly touching its highest since September the 1st before closing lower in the previous session. U.S. gold futures eased 1.2% to $1,942.80. The Fed held interest rates steady on Wednesday, but its updated quarterly projections show that rates may be lifted once more this year and kept tight through 2024. And we come back to Nigeria now. Earlier today on Business Morning, we had that conversation on logistics and non-oil exports in the country. Some of the challenges. We had two ladies here and they shared their perspective and experience, a first-hand experience, I must add.
Okay, so investment, that's one of the first things, investing in infrastructure. If you want to deliver a package from here to a remote area in Ondo State, for example, which is my state, you're taking into account delays from poor road networks. So investment in infrastructure, right. Investment in technology. These exporters or people moving goods generally have a better experience, a better customer experience if they're able to track from point A to point B. And it just eases, it's just about making life easier for people as they're moving goods. So if we're able to track goods, invest in tracking, and then regulators just helping us on the road. Even on our way here, you're seeing people harassing riders on the road. These things cause delays.
Yeah, when it comes to permits.
Exactly.
I see that a lot with Lagos and Ogun State.
Yes, and a lot of the time you're finding out on the day that you're supposed to have this, and it's like, well, where? And then on that spot, the rider is delayed, his goods are seized, he is arrested, the bike is arrested, and that obviously...
And the goods.
The goods, yes, with the goods. So that affects your ability to deliver on your promises to your customers. So these challenges, I don't know how we can ease it. All we're trying to do is make life easy for people and keep commerce going and keep the economy growing. We're just trying to deliver and fulfill orders. So anything the government can do in terms of allowing us just do our work. You have regulations. Yes, we will meet up to those regulations, but there should be some kind of dialogue between us and them.
Welcome back to watching Business Incorporated here on Channels Television. We're still staying in Nigeria, where we started before the break, where Gary accounts for 2% of the entire food inflation basket in the country. And we've seen in the first 8 months of this year, price has surged almost 29% to 25,000 naira for 50-kilogram bag of Gary in the country. Obviously a worrying sight, since we see that it's one of the staple food that Nigerians consume. But let's delve more into it with Halima Adedinro, She's an analyst with Financial Derivatives Company, joins us virtually from Victoria Island. Hi, Halima. I mean, I don't think we should even be asking what's responsible for this movement. I mean, because everything has been affected. But I think I would like to ask if people are turning to alternatives of Gary because of the price.
Also, thanks for having me. There's no, I will still not touch a bit about the causes of price hike in Gary, which is number one, the high cost of production, and the logistic costs too is very high. But apart from those two factors, we'd also see that when we look at the cross elasticity of demand for Gary, that is the substitute products or commodities that can be consumed in place of Gary, like semo, flour, we'll see that those commodities too are experiencing a spike in the prices or in their prices. And so this is making the demand for Gary to increase because consumers are not able to shift to those other alternatives. And what we are experiencing also is making income, so to speak, stay flat or even decline. So there is no much disposable income, or the level of disposable income is declining drastically. So it is making shift to other alternatives very difficult for consumers. And because Gary is seen as more affordable commodities compared to this substitute, that is why we are seeing a drive in the price because of the increase in its demand. And we should also forget that Gary is mostly consumed in the southern part of Nigeria, but it is not consumed alone. It is consumed it's like a complementary product. It can be used as to form swallow like eba, or it can be taken with moimoi in a raw form. So those things too would tend to affect the demand for Gary because they seem to be more affordable when it comes to exploring other alternative, which is bread, semo, and all. So those are some of the factors.
In other words, this surge in price, because it's not just Gary that is experiencing the increase, has not changed the taste of a lot of Nigerians. So we still see that demand for it is kind of stable.
Yes, that is what we are seeing presently.
All right, then Nigeria is the world's largest producer of cassava. We have at this point our output is about 34 million tons. Are we using all of them for Gary? You know, are we maximizing being the world's largest producer of cassava? I guess there's so many things we can do with it.
Exactly. So first of all, Gary is derived from cassava, of which cassava has a lot of derivatives like ethanol. Like it can be converted to syrup, it can be converted to, it's even used in biofuel, can be converted to chips. So because there are several alternatives that cassava is being used for, so it limits the supply of cassava to the Gary processing sector. So this means that there will be a decline also in the volume of cassava that will be available for Gary production in Nigeria. And because there is a supply-demand gap, even domestically, so it's causing a lot of lag when it comes to our export volume as well. So that is what we are experiencing currently.
All right, but we have a lot of initiatives from the federal government. I remember when we tried to do the cassava bread and all of that. Would you say the government is doing enough to maximize our potential when it comes to cassava, and then, whatever other derivatives we're supposed to use them for?
So initiatives, schemes, and all, they are very good because they are growth propelling if they are well implemented. And like you just said now that there was a time we had the cassava bread initiative. That was during the regime of President Obasanjo. But the concern now is that we are not seeing much in that space. Is it that the scheme is dead, or what are the hindrances causing a delay or a lag in the success of this scheme? We are yet to find out. But the most obvious factors are continuity in implementing scheme has been our problem or our challenge in the country. And not only that, we face a lot of diversion of funds at times. When a particular fund is being allocated to a scheme or an initiative, most times they are being diverted and will not result into the required targets or goals of those schemes. But if then, another thing is that in Nigeria generally, we'll see that farming activities is more of peasant than commercial purposes. So if there can be accessibility, now we have the land, it is available, but if there can be accessibility to those lands, to the volume of land, it will go a long way to increase the turnout or output of the agricultural sector in Nigeria. So it's not only about scheme, it's not only about initiative, but how well are they implemented? How well are they result-oriented? So those are the factors.
Yeah, a lot of questions there, Halima, a lot of questions, because it's not about the initiative, it's about the implementation and the results of thereof. Thank you so much, Halima Adedinro, analyst with Financial Derivatives Company.
Thanks for having me.
All right, still staying in Nigeria, the Central Bank of Nigeria has announced the deferment of the date of its much-awaited two-day rates decision meeting scheduled to take place next week. In a statement released by the Corporate Communications Department, the financial markets regulator deferred the date of its 293rd meeting scheduled for Monday and Tuesday, September the 25th and 26th. Although the CBN did not give reasons for the deferment, it mentioned that a new date will be communicated to the financial market in due course. And the president of the Dangote Group, Mr. Aliko Dangote, has said that the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited is prepared to supply its newly commissioned private refinery with crude oil in a few weeks. In a brief note issued on Wednesday, the president of the conglomerate explained that this will enable the 650,000 barrels per day refinery to fully commence its operations at the facility. His comment is coming against the alleged denial of crude oil supply by the National Oil Company to the private refinery, which is reputed to be the world's largest single-train refinery. He notes that the NNPCL had rather been very encouraging and supportive in their business trajectory in the areas of oil and gas. Finally, we've Nigeria to Gambia now, where the currency is poised to extend its run as Africa's best performing currency this year, supported by stronger remittance and tourism inflows. The nation's central bank governor released this statement. The Dalasi has gained 0.9% against the dollar this year, the most among 23 African currencies tracked and one among 3 that have advanced. It's being supported by external budget funding and disbursement under an International Monetary Fund program, according to the governor of the central bank in the country. And another report, this time measuring digital quality of life index for 2023. It ranked the country at a position 76 globally, and Kenya emerged second in Africa behind South Africa, which ranks 72 globally, ahead of Nigeria, which now ranks 88. And from there, we'll go to Ghana, where the country is actively strategizing and implementing policies and initiatives to advance its power sector to achieve 100% universal energy access and potentially export electricity to its big brother, Nigeria. Well, Mr. Hansen Money, who is the head of Generation and Transmission Unit at the Ministry of Energy in Ghana, conveyed this during his presentation in Lagos on the second day of the Nigeria Energy Leadership Summit. Mr. Money highlighted that Ghana has already achieved a remarkable 80% to 85% universal energy access within its borders through robust policy formulation and implementation. That's the much we can take on Business Incorporated today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. We'll do it again tomorrow. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Enjoy the rest of the day.